So you guys remember what series we're on, right? We're on Red Flags. Red Flags is our series on relationships. Oh yeah, and we are talking tonight about dating. About dating. Hello. Okay. We just lost connection. That's never happened before. We're going to be talking about dating tonight. Next week, like we said during announcements, we're going to be having a Q&A panel. So, we will have an Instagram post with a number on it, and you guys can send in all your relationships questions. And I cannot promise that we will answer every single one of them, but we will answer as many as possible. Do not ask this year, who are the Nephilim and how do we stop them? That is for a different series, not on relationships. And yeah, I'm not even going to mention some of the other questions that got sent in the past, but they were funny. So first off, I'm going to take one out of Pastor Logan's book, and I'm going to tell a story at my expense, all right? So I've only dated two people in my life, one of them being my wife. The only other person that I've ever dated was someone who I dated my senior year of high school, and she's great. We got a great relationship now. She's actually married to one of my good friends, funny enough. And yeah, so I don't have a ton of, I suppose, dating stories because I'm not like some of y'all who have had 15 boyfriends or girlfriends by the time I was a freshman. That wasn't in my notes. That was just some unnecessary shade. Lord forgive me. No, but I'm gonna tell a story. So my senior year of high school, I had my first girlfriend. By the way, I guess I had girlfriends in elementary school, but that doesn't count. You know, it's just like recess girlfriend, whatever. But I had this one girlfriend my senior year of high school, and we dated most of our senior year. And for the most part, it was a really good, like, healthy relationship. Like, it wasn't like super toxic, like some of the horror stories I've heard from people in this room about dating. There was no like crazy horror stories. For the most part, it was really good. But anyways, we're leading up to our senior prom. And the girl that I was dating at the time said that her older sister, who lived in Colorado at the time, who she only got to see like once or twice a year, was going to be in town visiting that weekend. So she was like, all right, I'm not going to go to prom because I want to spend time with my sister. And I'm like, okay, I totally understand that, I know how important your family is to you. So it was like no hard feelings, right? Well, after she had said that, maybe like a week or 2 weeks later, I can't really remember, it was so long ago, we ended up breaking up, and it was I don't even need to get into the reasons. It was a pretty good breakup for the most part. It was kind of like a mutual agreement, but here's where the funny part comes in at my expense. So we break up on a Wednesday night after youth group, okay? All right, the classic. God told me I was supposed to break up with you. No. And the next morning at school, I walk in to my, we called it Connections, which is like a homeroom. I don't know if you guys have that at your middle school or high school, but it was like a 15-minute period where like it's basically just to hang out. I think it's just to give the teachers a break, honestly. So I walk in, 5-10 minutes late, like I always did, and I sit down, and some of my buddies just instantly like start laughing, and they're like, "Dude, how do you feel?" And I'm like, "What? You heard that we broke up?" And then they're like, "We didn't even know that you broke up. How do you feel about," I'm not going to say her name. I almost did. How do you feel about her going to prom with Spencer? And I'm like, "What?" Spencer was her ex. And I was like, "No, I think you're mistaken. She's not going to prom. Her sister's in town visiting. She's not going to prom at all." And they're like, No, they're definitely going to prom together. And I'm like, what? So not only did I not find out from her, not only did she lie to me about not going to prom, but then she went with her ex. But it's okay. Your boy rebounded. He had someone in the back pocket, and I ended up taking, I literally asked a different girl that night to go to prom with me, and she was way more fun than that girl would have ever been. I'll probably just cut that story out if I upload this to YouTube. But yeah, so, got my get back. But anywho, yeah, I had backup. You guys know what I'm talking about. So, anywho, tonight we're talking about red flags of dating. And if we are Christian, which pretty much everyone in the room I would say is a Christian. If you're not a Christian yet, it's the place to be. But if we are dating someone, what is the end goal of dating someone? Marriage. Thank you. Now, statistically speaking, most of you will get married at some point in your life, I mean, maybe one of you guys will be like Paul in the Bible or like a Catholic priest and not get married for some reason. But statistically speaking, most of y'all will probably get married. And, that's what the studies show. And unfortunately, speaking statistically, most of those marriages will not work out. That is unfortunate. We do not like that statistic. And statistically speaking, of those that don't make it, a lot of those people will look back and say there were actually warning signs that they saw early on. They saw warning signs like, this may not be the wisest thing to do. This relationship isn't healthy. But they ignored the warning signs because, when you're dating somebody, you want things to work out, right? And love will make you overlook a lot of those things. You want things to work out, so you overlook those things. You want to fall in love. You want to have all the love songs. You want every Drake song to apply to you and be like, yes, that applies to me. You want the relationship to move forward. When you're dating, you want to be in love. And if you see something in the other person that might be a red flag, your brain is telling you, watch out for this, watch out for this, watch out for this. But your heart is saying, love will make it all work out. And today, what I want to do today is I want us to be wise and pay attention because there may be some warning signs or what we might call red flags that are sticking out that we got to pay attention to. We're going to talk about those today. So I'm going to call this message 5 Red Flags of Dating. Or the alternative title is 5 Signs You're Dating the Wrong Person. So, with that word, we'll start with a word from Proverbs chapter 27. We're going to be reading a lot of Proverbs tonight because Proverbs is all about wisdom. And Proverbs 27:12 says this, sensible people, turn your neighbor and say sensible people, will see trouble coming and avoid it. But an unthinking person, turn your neighbor and say unthinking person, will walk right into it and regret it later. So we've got another slide that breaks this down a little bit more if we want to go to the next one. So we see on this side, because I want this to get in your guys' heads. On one side, we've got sensible. So sensible people, they see trouble coming and they avoid it. An unthinking person walks into trouble and regrets it later. We're going to say these things out loud. Sensible people and unthinking people and I know this may seem elementary, but some of y'all need to hear it, all right? Including myself at times. But anywho, so we're going to say all those things out again. I gotta hold my hand up here because I want all you guys to understand this. And some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight may sound extreme, but that's because they are extreme. And what I'm doing is I'm talking to those of you who want to faithfully follow Jesus. So if you're calling yourself a Christian, if you're like, yes, I follow Jesus, this message is specifically for you. If you're in this room and you're like, I'm not a Christian, or I'm still kind of feeling things out, that's okay. And I just want to take a moment and acknowledge that because some of the things that may be said tonight may sound kind of crazy. They may sound kind of extreme, and you're like, who's this youth pastor who's saying all these things that maybe I've never heard before, maybe I don't agree with? And here's the thing, I'm okay with saying things that may sound extreme because what's normal is divorce. What's normal is heartbreak. What's normal is broken families and decades and decades of pain. So I don't care if it sounds extreme because I want you guys to have healthy relationships. I want something different for you guys than all the statistics. So we're going to be talking tonight about 5 red flags of dating. We'll start with the first one. The first red flag of dating is when they're not consistently pursuing Jesus. And it's on your cards. When they're not consistently pursuing Jesus. So it might be a red flag in a relationship if they are not consistently pursuing Jesus. And I'm being very intentional with that word of consistently because that means that you're intentional about your relationship with God, meaning that you are not perfect, meaning that you will not ever mess up, but it's more so the general direction of your life. And a way to see that, I know I've used this illustration before, but if you can look back at your life a month ago, maybe a couple months ago, maybe a couple of years ago, and if you can't say that yourself or that person is looking more like Jesus now than they were back then that's a red flag. That's what I mean, consistently pursuing Jesus. And at the same time, you may ask someone, well, what do you believe spiritually? And they might say, oh, yeah, no, I'm a Christian. I I was, my parents are Catholic, and I go to church on Christmas and Easter, right? I'm a CEO Christian, Christmas, Easter only. I believe in my favorite one is, I believe in a higher power. All right. So that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a committed follower of Jesus. So I'm going to say something, again, that's very extreme that wouldn't be true in every case, but it is true in most cases. If you meet someone and you spend a significant amount of time with them, you have a very intentional one-on-one talk. And after that relationship has been built and you've talked to them, you've gotten to know them, and they haven't brought up, you haven't heard about their relationship with Jesus, you haven't heard about their faith, you haven't heard about the life group or the small group or the accountability partner that they haven't talked to you about what God is speaking to them, if they haven't talked about their involvement in church, within the first hour of having an intentional, one-on-one conversation with them, if they haven't mentioned that, that's a red flag, guys. And I know maybe that sounds extreme, but that's a red flag, because you have to remember that people talk first about what matters most to them. People talk first about what they value most. If you've spent some time with me, you know that for sports, I love the Iowa Hawkeyes, all right? And they beat the Oklahoma State Cowboys in the wrestling duel. Where's Cole Satica? Okay, there he is. He's hiding. I love the Iowa Hawkeyes, and they did, in fact, beat the Oklahoma State Cowboys in wrestling this past weekend. I know none of you guys probably care about wrestling or college wrestling, but I'm passionate about it, all right? If we're talking about TV shows, dude, like Breaking Bad. I love Breaking Bad. It is so stinking good. Don't watch it yet. Wait till you're older, but my goodness, I love Breaking Bad. It's got the best acting in all of cinema, all right? If you know me, one of my main hobbies is Call of Duty, even though I get so mad playing it because they're stinking cheaters and whatnot, but I love Call of Duty. Shout out to Tommy DeClue in the back. My interests, that I like loud speakers and I like being obnoxious with that stuff. I got the sound box in the back. If somebody talks to you about their interests and Jesus or any of that stuff never comes up, that's a red flag. And if, just a side note, if they talk about their ex a lot, that's also a red flag. But that's not something that we're going to dive too much into. Hello. This keeps on disconnecting for some reason. You tend to talk early on in a conversation about what you value most. So if you have to ask, what are your spiritual beliefs? That's probably not a good sign. So Scripture, it gives us a very clear warning when Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, he says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? Now, this isn't necessarily criticizing an unbelieving person. There are a lot of people who aren't Christians, who aren't followers of Jesus, who are great people. My family is a great example of this. I've got one side of my family where almost none of them are Christian, but they are some of the most fun, loving people you will ever meet. So this is not necessarily a diss on people who aren't Christian, but what this is saying is that when there's a different spiritual foundation of your life, it is almost impossible to build a rich and God-honoring life in relationship when there's different spiritual values. But I love him, you say, or, he's so sweet, I love him so much, or, but she's a baddie, or, but look at his jawline and his forearm veins. Yeah, look at Chase is over there rubbing the jawline, We have so much fun together. You have no idea, or I just feel like God's limiting my options. God's making it so difficult. I can't find a good godly man, or I can't find a good godly woman, so I'll just find somebody. I've heard people say things like, God's limiting my options. God's not limiting your options. He's loving you and he's protecting you. And he wants you to share your most treasured gift with someone else who also thinks that their relationship with Jesus is their most treasured gift. In fact, it says in the Old Testament, in Amos chapter 3, verse 3, I bet a lot of you guys have never even read this book, Amos chapter 3, where the prophet asks the question, can two walk together unless they've agreed? Can two walk together unless they've agreed? Can two people move in the same direction? Can you build a life on unequal values, on incredibly different spiritual values? Because I promise you, what you believe spiritually will impact every single aspect of your life. Your spiritual foundation will impact how you parent one day. I know that's a long ways off for a lot of you guys, but trust me, you do not want to have entirely different beliefs on how to parent someone with your spouse, all right? That kind of goes without explaining, you know? It'll influence how you spend your money and how you give your money generously, or it'll affect if you go to church or if you don't go to church. And if you go to church, how do you serve in the church? And are you in a life group? And what shows do you watch together? And what shows do you not watch together? And do you go to parties? And what kind of parties do you go to? And what do you do at those parties? And who are your friends? And how do you treat people? And how do you respond to people who hurt you? And how do you forgive? What do you stand for? What do you stand against? What is your divine purpose in life? Why do you exist? All of these things are affected by your spiritual foundation. Do you guys hear what I'm saying? You with me? All right. If you have a different spiritual foundation, how can you expect to move in the same direction when you have different spiritual values? In fact, I would venture to say this. If the person that you are in a relationship with is not serving God, then it is impossible for them to love you in the way that God intends, because God is the one that moves your heart. You know, what you believe about Scripture, about God and eternity, it matters more than you could imagine. Here, I'll just say this. If you guys can remember one sentence that I say tonight, remember this. Don't give them your heart if God doesn't have theirs. Don't give them your heart if God doesn't have theirs. All right, here's the second red flag. You guys still with me? All right, haven't tuned me out yet. You're like, I don't like what this guy's saying. Second one is when those you love don't love who you're dating. When those you love don't love who you're dating. Whew. Take a deep breath. So, when you have a very strong community surrounding you, especially when they're spiritually grounded, all right? I'm not saying, you know, if your unsaved cousin is like, I don't like him because he's a Christian. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if the people that you are surrounded with who are spiritually grounded, if they collectively are saying that they do not like the person that you're in a relationship with, you should probably listen. You know, and we see this all the time because you meet someone who's cute and you have fun together and you're like, I like the way he smells, and you're like, I like the way that we walk together and we've got chemistry, and I get all the tinglies when we're together, you know, and then you talk to your best friend who's a Christian and they're like, I don't know, I don't really like the way you act when you're with her. I don't like the way you act when you're with him. And then, you know, your brother who's a Christian and is like, you know, I don't really think this person's good for you. And then your mom who has your best interests at heart is like, you know, I don't think this person is really good for you. And then your dad, who's also a strong believer, says, I don't know, I don't think this person's really good for you. And then your dog says that they don't like him. No, I'm just kidding. You know, when those people around you who you really trust, who you know love Jesus, if they are collectively saying that they do not like the person that you're dating, that is a red flag, guys. That is a red flag. And you know, Proverbs chapter 27, verse 9 says this: the heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. So listen, when the people who love you are saying things like this, you need to pay attention. You know, and I want you to be open to what they see, because they may see something that you don't. They may say something lovingly, like, you know, the way that he's treating you, he's not honoring you. He's not respecting you. Or they may say, you know, I've seen it. You know, he's pressuring you sexually. He's pressuring you to do things that you know are against what you believe, that you know are things that you don't want to do. They go against your spiritual values. They may say, she's way too controlling. She's insecure and she's just trying to control you because she's insecure. And they may say these things that you don't see, so you have to listen to them. And guys, what's going to happen is you're going to want them to be wrong. You're going to want them to be wrong because you want things to work out. You want to like this person. You say things like, oh, but you don't know him the way that I know him. Or, oh man, he's got so much potential. You know, or I know she struggles with these things, but. Cut it out. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15 says, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. And what we want to do is we want to be wise. Number 3, the third red flag. when you don't experience healthy conflict. When you don't experience healthy conflict. Now, and this is not saying that when you're in a healthy relationship, when you're in a God-serving relationship, you will not ever fight. That's not what this is saying at all. It's not if you fight, but it's how you fight that really matters, because healthy couples tend to fight fair, and unhealthy couples tend to fight dirty. You could say it this way: healthy couples fight for resolution. They want things to work out, and unhealthy couples fight for victory. I want to win. I want to be right, and you're wrong. You know, a perfect example of this is, man, Kirsten and I were fighting the other night, and man, she came storming into the other room, and she's like, "Get out from under the bed, you coward, and fight like a man." No, I'm just kidding. She didn't do that. That was a joke. Thanks, Dane. Yeah, no, that didn't actually happen. That didn't actually happen. Now, the reality is, Kirsten and I don't hardly ever actually fight. You know, we have maybe disagreements, but the difference is, you know, we go into it willing to listen to the other person and willing to apologize and admit that we're wrong. Newsflash, guys, you can be wrong in an argument. Like, you don't always have to be right in an argument. You know, you have to be willing to go into that and say, "You're right. I was in the wrong. I'm sorry. I'm going to work forward to, or I'm going to work on not doing that going forward." You know, we don't just wait for our turn to speak. We don't throw spears back. We genuinely listen. And another big thing, and man, I could just preach a whole sermon on this right now. We don't assume the worst in the other person. So much of the conflict that I deal with you guys is because you go into it not looking at them as another brother or sister in Christ, not going in there assuming that they're a good person or assuming the best in them. You go into it assuming the worst. And that will completely change your mindset going forward, not just in dating, in relationships in general. Stop assuming the worst in people. Don't assume the worst. Assume the best. Just trust me on that. That'll save you so much heartbreak and anger. So here's some things to look out for. If you're always fighting, if your pattern is fight, break up, make up, fight, break up, make up, fight, break up, make up. All right, if you've dated and broke up with the same person like 5 or 6 times, get out of that. Run far and run fast, all right? It's not good. And I'm done hearing the excuse, "Well, if we get married, that'll just solve the problem." No, it won't. No, it won't. I've seen my friends. Goose. If you go to Evangel, people like to get married younger because typically they're all Christian. Guys, getting married will not solve all your problems, guys. It won't solve your dating problems. It won't solve your daddy issues. It won't solve your insecurities. Stop saying that. It's akin to the same people who have messed up marriages and they say, if we just have a baby, it'll fix it. No, it won't. No, it won't. That'll just mess up that kid, all right? And you guys know what I'm talking about. Stop. Not true. Not true. Don't say that. You know, if you're fighting all the time and you're breaking up all the time and you're getting back together and you're breaking up, break it off for good. Trust me. And on the other extreme, if you never, ever fight and there's never conflict, that's also an issue, and it's probably because you've got underlying issues that you don't know how to work through. So what we're looking for is a reasonable amount of healthy conflict with maturity, spiritual maturity, to love each other through the conflict so that you can move the relationship forward. I love the verse from James chapter 1, verse 19 and 20. It says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." Turn to your neighbor and say, "Quick to listen." Turn to your other neighbor and say, "Slow to anger." Everyone take a deep breath. All right, I feel so much better now. Getting fired up. Number 4, the 4th red flag. When you find it difficult to trust the one you're with. When you find it difficult to trust the one you're with. Now, that might be a little bit of a challenge. And, you know, what does Paul tell us some of the qualities of love are in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7? It says, "Love always protects, always trusts." And I want to highlight that always trusts. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have some moments of insecurity, or it doesn't mean that you'll never, ever ask the question, do you really care about me? Are we really moving forward in this relationship? Those things are natural, but when you are consistently not trusting the person that you are in a relationship with, that is indeed a red flag. And I want to unpack this a bit. in some cases, the reason that you can't trust that person is because they're actually untrustworthy. All right, when you say you can't trust them as far as you can throw them, you actually can't trust them as far as you can throw them. Meaning he's always sliding into other girls' DMs, or she's always snapping other boys, or even worse, snapping ex-boyfriends, or she's posting thirst traps, or he's liking other girls' thirst traps. Hello, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. I see what y'all like. No, I'm just playing. I'm just kidding. I don't actually get on Instagram a whole lot. But listen, if there's a reason that you're constantly having to pay attention to that, it's probably a red flag. And now let me say this. Let me say this gently, because I know this is going to rustle some feathers. The other hand, you're the problem. It could be that you're overly possessive or insecure, and you're looking for reasons to not trust when they're not really there. It could be that the problem isn't that they are untrustworthy. It could be that you are not trusting. In either way, it's a red flag, even if it's a red flag for you. So if you find yourself always wondering, man, why is he always looking at his phone? Or why is she always looking at her phone? Or where is she? And I'm constantly checking his location. And, why didn't he call? And pay attention to what that says about the relationship. If you're always saying, well, she's amazing, or, oh, well, he's amazing, but I don't really trust him, or I don't really trust her, or I really like him, but I don't really trust him, why would you stay with someone that you don't trust? It's a red flag worth paying attention to, because the wise in the thinking, the sensible people see trouble coming and they avoid it. The fifth and final thing that we're going to talk about, and in my opinion, this is the most important. All of these are important, but this is probably the most important, is when the person you're dating is leading you away from Jesus instead of closer to Jesus. When the person you're dating is leading you away from Jesus instead of closer to Jesus. So it's a red flag if when you're spending time with someone and spiritually you're not as vibrant as you were before you started that relationship. All right? I mean, I'm going to talk more about this, but just period. If your relationship with God is not where it was before you started dating that person, red flag, period. So a good question to ask yourself at checkpoints throughout the relationship, like I was saying, I'm not necessarily saying like you start dating someone and the next day you're like, man, I don't feel as on fire for God as I did yesterday. If you're a month in or 3 months in or you're a year or 2 years in and you look back and you're like, man, I don't have the spiritual vibrance now that I did when we started dating, red flag, run far and run fast. Ask the question, are we both growing closer to Jesus? And in fact, it was Jesus who said this very clearly in Matthew chapter 24. He said, see to it that no one leads you astray. That no one is all-encompassing. All right, that is the friends you surround yourself with. That is your spouse. That is everyone. Let's just get practical. So if you start dating someone and you start going to youth group less, red flag. If you start dating someone, you start going to church on Sundays less, red flag. And now this is something that is not 100% of the time always true, but most of the time it is. If you start dating and you drift away from your Christian community, it's probably a red flag. Now, I understand times change when you get in a relationship, and I'm not saying that you'll always be able to hang out with your friends 7 days a week once you start dating, but if you start dating someone and all of a sudden your Christian community is like, where are you? You fell off the face of the earth, probably a red flag. If you start dating someone and you start compromising sexually over and over again, and you wake up and you realize we're rationalizing sin together, could be a red flag. And again, I know this can feel extreme, but the Bible is very clear that the gift of sexual intimacy is reserved for the covenant of marriage. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be tempted. So I'm not saying that I'm just going to be real with y'all, all right? I'm not saying that if you have sexual temptations in your mind towards your boyfriend or girlfriend, it doesn't necessarily mean that it absolutely is not from God, all right? Because God wired us to have those urges, but it's reserved for marriage. It's reserved for the covenant of marriage, all right? So and again, I'm not saying that, if you're in a relationship with someone, you're never going to get those tingly feelings, I'm not saying that. You will be tempted, but you got to reserve that for marriage. And here's the challenge when you start engaging in sex before marriage, when you're dating. Proverbs chapter 5, and I'm not going to dive into this, it says that sex is intoxicating. That's what the Bible says. Proverbs 5 says that sex is intoxicating. You can look it up. I'm not making it up. Now, I'm sure that not a single person in this room has ever been drunk before. I'm positive. Now, just raise your hands. I'm kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. But whether you have actually been drunk or not, I hope you haven't, but you've probably seen people, either in your own life or in movies, people who are drunk. And what happens when you get drunk, when you get intoxicated? You start getting better looking, everyone else starts getting better looking. You look in the mirror like, oh man, I'm a 10 out of 10. You're like, man, they look good, and they look good, and they look good. And what does being intoxicated do? It blurs your vision, it lowers your standards, and it clouds your judgment. Now, here's the problem. Some of you, you're getting it going and you're intoxicated. You're with someone distinctly below your standards because your vision is clouded. Your standards are lowered and you're sitting there thinking, we could make it work. And maybe I can just get them to love Jesus a little bit more. Maybe we'll just get married and it'll be fine. It won't matter because you're drunk. And it's time for some of you guys to sober up. It's time to sober up. Turn to your neighbor and say, sober up. Sober up. And here's what the scripture says. I want to look at this one more time. I want this to sink in. The sensible, what do they do? Can we get up on the screen? Next one. There it is. The sensible, I want everyone to say it. The sensible, and the unthinking person, and regrets it later. And regrets it later. Now, I'm saying this, because I don't want to say it in a harsh way, but there are some people who are in relationships and they know that it's not God's best for them, and they probably need to break up. And if you need a Bible verse for how to do it, here's Psalm chapter 119, verse 115. If you're dating someone who's far from God, okay, well, kind of stole the punchline. If you're dating someone who's far from God and they're leading you away from God and it's destructive to you, this is what the Bible says. Get out of my life, for I intend to obey the commands of my God. Don't actually say that, guys. Don't actually say that to someone. All right, say that, contextualize it in your own words. You know how to best communicate that. Don't actually say, get out of my life. But the principle is, if we're not growing closer together, if we're not growing closer together towards Jesus, then we should separate ourselves because you intend to obey the commands of your God. And what's going to happen? You're going to spend a lot of time with someone, and at some point, you may be a little intoxicated, and you're going to try and make things work. And then you're going to sober up, maybe on a Wednesday night, maybe on a Sunday morning, and you're going to sober up, and you're going to say, this is not good for me. Man, I am compromising. Man, I have been intoxicated. I haven't been thinking clearly. I haven't been seeing things clearly. I need to break this up. This is not God honoring. And the most loving thing that you can do in that situation is to break it off. That's the most loving thing that you can do. And you're not going to want to because you've got so much invested, all right? I know how it goes. And you can say, oh, but we've been together for 6 months. We've been together for 2 years. I don't want to do it. It's going to hurt. And I just want to encourage you to have the courage to make that change, because sometimes a change is necessary for that other person to come into a relationship with God. And sometimes the change is necessary for God to do a work in you, breaking that relationship off. Because you can't marry the right person if you're dating the wrong one. You can't marry the right person if you're dating the wrong one. So, this is not in the Bible because they didn't have these kinds of things in the Bible, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of advice. When you're breaking up with someone, don't do it over text. Don't do it over text unless you're like e-dating someone on the other side of the world or something. Do it in person and do it in a loving way. And don't come running back to that person 3 days later after you broke up. You're like, I heard our song on Spotify Shuffle. Or, do you just want to talk and try and work things out? I've really done some thinking and we can make it. No, don't do that. And once you break up, don't hang out with them. That wasn't even in my notes. Don't do that. If you break up with someone, do not hang out with them. Don't give me the crap of, oh, we're just going to talk and work things out. Stop it. It's the bait of Satan. Don't do that, okay? Holy cow. I feel like a dad right now. I am. Oh, my goodness. Whew. Don't do that. And some of you guys are maybe thinking, dang, why is Pastor Peyton so extreme in this message? Why is he yelling all the time? Why is he being so extreme? And guys, I'm doing this because pain on the other side of a broken marriage is incredibly difficult and painful. It affects so many people. The pain of divorce is something that you never want to go through. This is something that I'm passionate about, guys, because I care about you too much. That's why I'm yelling. So those are the red flags. Those are the red flags. And there's another side which is very, very special, and those are the green flags. I didn't make a slide with a green flag, but these are the things that you see that you like that leads you to know that God may be blessing that relationship. And maybe you're like, well, what are they? They're the antithesis of the 5 red flags. The first one, when the person you're dating is consistently pursuing Jesus. When you can look at the person that you're dating and you can say, yes, throughout my time, before I dated them and now that I'm dating them, they are consistently becoming more and more like Christ. That is a green flag. Second one, when the person you're spending time with, when those that love you, when those that care about you, when those who are spiritually grounded love the person that you're dating. That is a green flag. The third one, when you do have conflict in such a way that the Holy Spirit leads you through that conflict, you do conflict in a healthy way, it's a really good sign. The fourth one, when you're growing in trust and you have a peace about God's hand upon that relationship. When you find yourself, you're not constantly not trusting that person. And I'm not saying you just give out your trust blindly, but when you're like, yes, I know this person serves God, I trust them, and I trust that God's got his hand on this relationship. And fifth, when you wake up and realize that you're actually both growing closer together towards Jesus. Because when you're spending time together and you're spending time together with Jesus, that's when it gets really special. That's when you recognize that this isn't just a dating relationship. God could have his hand on this and making it become a God-honoring covenant of marriage. That what God joins together, no man would ever separate. No scheme of the enemy, no earthly wisdom, that nothing could separate. And that's different. That's weird. That's extreme. I know that's counter-cultural, all right? Well over half of marriages in the United States end in divorce, and I don't want any of you guys to go through that. I want you guys to have God-honoring marriages and God-honoring dating relationships. And that's possible when you're sensible, when you're wise, when you see danger coming, and you avoid it. So whether you're single and loving Jesus or you're dating and loving Jesus, at the end of the day, your relationship with Jesus is what matters most. And I know that's cliche, but that is the honest truth. Now, we're going to end tonight a little bit differently than we normally do, all right? I'm about to pray, and we'll close, and then we're going to break out into small groups, okay? We'll have high school girls in the front of this room. We'll have middle school girls in the back of this room. We'll have high school boys in the room behind, and we'll have middle school boys out in the hallway with me, all right? You guys good with that? All right, here I'm going to pray real quick, and we're going to break out into small groups. That's how we're going to end the night.